Right, welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we have very special guests with us. We have Simon and Leigh from So I Married a Horror Fan podcast.
Yeah.
Hey gang.
Yeah, welcome back, Simon, and welcome, Leigh. This is Simon's second time and Lee's first time with us. So tell us a bit about your podcast. Let's go straight into the cheap plug.
That's your job.
I did it last time. You can.
That's your job.
So,
I've hired someone at work to tell people what my job role is, so I can just go, yeah, that's what I do too.
Yeah, refer to
This is
that.
your job.
It's all right, we've got questions for Leigh in a minute.
so our podcast. Thank you once again, guys, for having me back. It's nice that I didn't make an ass of myself the first time.
Well,
So for those of you that are unfamiliar with our podcast or didn't listen to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode, we're a married couple. I am a lifelong horror fan. Leigh was not. And then we decided one day to start a podcast. And basically the premise of the podcast was to try and get Leigh into horror movies. We've been going for about 2 years now. It's been more successful than I expected it to. I thought either the podcast or the marriage would have ended by now. But yeah, that's basically a similar format to what you guys do. Weekly episodes. We cover new films as well. We do sort of top 5 rankings and things like that as well. So yeah, kind of a mix of everything. But yeah, it's going well, I guess.
We're exactly the same. Well, I think anyone I know who has a podcast or does a podcast, they're like, are these good?
Yeah.
Is this anything? Like, if this was any other numbers in certain other areas, they'd be like, no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But for podcasting, apparently we're doing okay.
it. Yeah.
We're getting by, kind of thing. That actually answers the first thing we were going to say, which was that Leigh is not a horror fan. And we were just like, what was your relationship with horror before Simon?
non-existent, I think is the answer. So I grew up during the period of like everyone was terrified of like Freddy, Jason, Chucky, Ghostface.
Yeah.
And I was literally, that was all I knew about horror. And I was like, I never want to see it because these people are going to come and kill me and I don't want to go through that. And I just always, like, I was a massive pansy. I was scared of Scooby-Doo as a kid. Like,
It's terrifying stuff.
It is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Monsters
so
Unleashed.
yeah,
Monsters Unleashed.
not a horror fan at all.
Yeah.
We pretty much have a similar kind of thing anyway. We talked about this last time, but like my partner is pretty much none at all like with horror. She's had to get used to it with me.
Yeah.
Your partner Anna was not really like, she was a little bit.
Yeah, she prefers more modern ones. So when I kind of make her watch stuff from the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, she's not overly into it. So yeah, she's not massively.
She thinks
into it
everything
as well.
just looks outdated.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, you showed her Nightmare on Elm Street and she hated it.
Yeah, she hated it, which isn't a good way to start. But I mean, how are you guys feeling about the new Hellraiser? Obviously dropping, I believe, this Friday, hopefully.
Yeah, and
in
our
the UK.
crossover episode to plug it in there already.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be joining you guys over on your podcast for that. But I mean, there's a new Hellraiser coming. How are you feeling about it?
I'm going to let Simon take this one because he has been it.
yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it, man. I don't know how familiar you guys are with David Bruckner's work. But what really sold me on the idea of him doing it was The Night House. Have you guys seen The Night House?
Yeah, nice.
That movie, like having watched that movie, and then they were like, this guy's doing a Hellraiser movie. I was like, yeah. I was like, it makes complete sense. And like, I love the fact that they've not tried to remake the original. They're trying to like kind of readapt the novel, which is quite a cool idea. And I love the fact there was a quote because they showed it. So this is going out. When is this going out? Monday?
Yeah, this is going out on the Monday and this Friday. So this Friday, as you're listening, this Friday coming up is when on So I Married a Horror podcast we'll have drop an episode of the new Hellraiser.
So last night, because we're recording this on the Thursday prior, last night they had a secret screening of it at one of the film festivals. And there's a great quote from David Bruckner where he's talking about how like the idea of BDSM has changed. And he's like, even my mum like reads like 50 Shades of Grey now. And he's like talking about how they like redesigned the Cenobites so that their own skin was like leather, so that they're sacrificing themselves for this. So I was like, they have like a fundamental understanding of what makes the franchise work.
Yeah.
But then I said that about Rob Zombie's Monsters, and that was one of the worst films I've ever seen. So
I haven't taken the dive yet.
It's all kind of up for grabs. But what about you? Because you're someone who is very attracted to this little guy. So how do you feel about it?
I'm very excited for Leather Mummy.
Yeah.
I think that's all of my feelings just summed up. I'm very excited for Leather Mummy.
What about you guys? What are you?
That leads to my next question. Who's into S&M?
Yeah.
Tell us about your
Tell us about
ass.
S&M. Yeah.
You've got your assless chaps on.
I do have my assless chaps on, you know, but I always have them on. So it's not just for this. But I love the first 3 Hellraisers. I haven't seen any of the others. It's just something that I've always meant to do. However, I haven't heard particularly great things, and by the time I actually got round to watching them, all of the shitty ones had been removed from Netflix. So I was having trouble finding them. But I always feel like Hellraiser is kind of like the Dark Souls of horror films. It doesn't tell you much, but when you dig into it and when you dig into the lore and the world and the stories, there's so much there, and it's just incredible the amount of stuff there, and things that you kind of think have there's something in this film which always felt strange and out of place, but when you actually read about it, there's so much there, and it's not even mentioned in the film. So yeah, I kind of love the whole lore of it. I love how disgusting it is. I love how erotic it is. It's kind of, it's such a good film. I think this one is a masterpiece, the first Hellraiser. What about yourself?
Well, I literally only watched Hellraiser for the first. We both pretty much, did we? The first Hellraiser. We literally a year, 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
I'd only watched it for the first time. I mean, I knew Pinhead.
Yeah,
I knew Pinhead, obviously, and I'd seen like ideas of the film. I'd seen parts of the film, but I'd never actually watched it. So I wasn't quite prepared when it was like one. I didn't realize the level of eroticism that was in the film.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that at all. And then the level of gore and graphic for the time, the effects that are within this film are just phenomenal. Because I only watched it apart from the first time that I'd ever seen it the other day. And like delving into the film, I thought I remembered that the things like the Cenobites and things like that were quite like almost teased throughout the film. I forgot that they're literally front and center, like in the first couple of minutes. You get to see them all, and you get to see like the aftermath of what they do. So I was completely drawn in. I went after that one. I was like, right, I've got to watch. I think I literally said to you, I've managed to get 2 and 3. Just come and watch 2 and 3, which are just crazy films as well. Each one has a weird, like,
I love the second one.
The second one was mad, like the dreamscapes and like not dreamscapes,
but hell and
the hell and the worlds they go to and things like that. And then 3 has its own kind of odd macho eroticism.
I mean, kind of diving straight into the film. It opens with this beautiful kind of orchestral score.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton?
Yeah, what's your pleasure, Mr. Cotton? And there's we see Frank kind of, I think he's in Morocco, isn't he, buying this treasure box or this puzzle box that we see. And there was a line that I picked up on when I watched this again last night, and it was, I always heard when Frank buys the puzzle box, but he says take it, it's yours, but I didn't hear the man say it always was. And I don't know, there's just something about that, and the fact that it kind of implies that these people's destinies and fates is to always kind of end up with the Cenobites. It's kind of another kind of freakiness to it. And then that whole opening scene where we see Frank with the candles and he solves it, and then the hook's coming and grabbing him. it's
only
just
for like a
yeah,
second.
it's
So
only
you
for a
kind of
second,
wonder.
yeah.
That's why at the start you kind of wonder: is this going to be kind of one of those, quick cutaway kind of horror, kind of like you see it go in, but it doesn't show the full thing. Yeah, luckily it's not.
Yeah, we see the I don't even know what it is. It's like a pillar spinning around, and and then you see the Cenobites, who are freaky and disgusting on their own.
Yeah. I feel like Simon, you've probably got more depth into this character. Have you read the original?
I haven't read the original
story. No.
Hellbound Heart. No.
I've read the original novel and I've read some of the comic books, so I've looked at some of the stuff outside of the film. But yeah, it's interesting, like you say, that we kind of dive straight into this world. And like, I want to pick up on something that you said about the guy with the Asian man with the box, because
you know who that is?
Who?
It's James Holt.
No.
Yeah.
What? From Wayne's World?
Yeah, and from Kung Fu Panda, Mulan.
Oh wow!
I knew I recognized the voice. I did actually write, because I wrote down Chinese man feeling very racist right now. And going, I swear I recognize who that is. I didn't have time to actually look it up. I was like, is it the same guy?
Wow.
That's amazing.
Beautiful.
It's every film you've ever watched, which includes an old Chinese man, is that guy.
Yeah, basically.
It's like someone goes, we need an old Chinese man for this role. Someone call James Bond immediately.
So what I was going to say was he kind of reminds me of the guy from Gremlins who gives Billy the Mogwai. He's kind of like, it feels like there's more to him than maybe the film lets you know. Like, he potentially is like a human servant, I guess, for the Cenobites on Earth. Like, he knows these people are going to pass through, and he's kind of almost like the person that is collecting the souls for the Cenobites. Almost, that's kind of how that exchange comes across. But I don't know if that came across that way for anybody else.
Well, funnily enough, that's what I mentioned about when I read into it. So we see the Asian man at the start, and then throughout the film we see the homeless man. You see him, and then you see him eat the crickets, and then he comes and he picks up the box and turns into some random bone dragon and flies away. And I thought, I was like, what the fuck is that? Because there's bits of the film that I just always forget, and I always forget about that. So I was like, what the fuck? So I googled it, and so that kind of character is called an eremite. That's what they are in the world. So they are shapeshifters, and that Asian man is the homeless man, and they're formed where one Cenobite sends its apparently sends its demonic sperm through somebody else, and then they have sex with a woman who gives birth, dies in childbirth, and then the baby, when it grows up and when it's 16, it's revealed that it is a servant of the Cenobites, and it's given a puzzle box to look over and guide into the correct hands. So it is the same person, which is
Cronenberg, hell is going on.
It's insane.
I mean, it tracks with this film, but
it does. Yeah,
it's an extra level of madness that you don't quite.
And that's what I mean about the lore. And then I was reading some more stuff, and it said, this really horrid thing, which is they often they do disguise themselves as homeless people and vagrants, and they live in kind of tents under squats. And what they do is they have newspaper clippings and milk cartons of the people who have gone missing through the box that they keep as trophies. And it's just some sickening lore there that the film just doesn't tell you. I had to go away and research that. Yeah, I loved it.
It does. I think like the Clive Barker's got a fucked up brain.
Yeah,
from the original, or even some of the other ones, which not even all of them were done by Clive Barker. I think David McWilliam, I think, did other ones and created more lore for the story. I mean, the main thing that went to my mind is when the religious sect is known as the Order of the Gash.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're not even trying to hide what's going through your brain.
Yeah.
It's like all you want is gore and sex. And I almost feel like we were talking about like the censorship before. We both looked at the censorship. And the fact that it's pretty much sounds like the studio basically told them to reduce the sodomy, and maybe include more of like a story. So it basically sounded like he just wanted to have a film that was about a guy that bangs some woman and then gets torn apart, or everyone gets torn apart.
And I love it.
Yeah, it was. Well, it's his directorial debut as well, Clive Barker, and screenplay. I think he did all of these the first time, so it's very. It's an interesting first film.
Yeah, and for a first effort, it's so polished.
Made the film version of a Nine Inch Nails song.
Yes, that is what I was thinking. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I always forget is that there is kind of, I think, because we were introduced to the Cenobites quite quickly, and then all of the poster and all of the promotional materials feature Pinhead so kind of heavily that I think a lot of people probably forget that a lot of the story is kind of about Frank Cotton. It is kind of about this strange love triangle between Frank, his absolute cuck of a brother Larry, and then his wife Julia, and it is about this kind of Frank escaping and trying to kind of get blood to rejuvenate himself. And
that part of the story, I do remember the first time I saw that part of the story, I was just remember, right, I'm going to watch Hellraiser for the first time. This is not the direction I was expecting this film to go in at all. I mean, sorry, I've blanked on the wife's name again. Julia. Yeah, Julia. I mean, I didn't see her as the sex symbol of this film. I mean, the actress herself, I mean, I've seen play many of like dinner ladies and many like in many British comedies and Welsh films like I think there's a film like Pride. She feels like a Welsh that's the only films that I'd mainly seen her in, were these like older lady kind of housewife kind of ones, and then here she is just getting banged like crazy by Frank.
She's responsible for your dinner lady fetish.
I said this to Leigh earlier because she was watching it. I was like, I'm pretty sure Julia Cotton, or Julia, what her name is in this movie, her boobs are the first boobs I ever saw in the film. I'm almost 100% confident.
Really?
So, yeah.
It wasn't until I was watching it this time, and I was watching it on Prime, so when it pauses, it gives you like the underneath bit of like, this is who was in the film, and her little picture, and I was like, I know that face. And I went and looked her up, and she's in like Doctor Who and like the BBC adaptation of Casanova, and I was like, how the fuck did I not realise this the first time I watched it? Because she looks nothing like
exactly.
that.
I love it.
Yeah, I was going to say that now she doesn't look anything like the character, like in this film. She's completely different.
Yeah. And there's stuff like when that is in this film it just feels like it's just Clive Barker being like, how can we gross people out? Because when they first move into this kind of beautiful, massive country house, it's just full of like maggots and cockroaches, rotting food, and it's so gross.
I was eating my lunch watching
it
earlier. I forgot about that scene.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I was eat noodles, and I was like, oh yeah, there's the cockroaches and the maggots.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Also, bizarrely, the moving in scene has potentially, for me, the one scene in this movie that makes me cringe the most, and it's when Larry catches his hand on the nail, and you just see it like rip and I'm just like, oh no,
it's weird, isn't it? Those kind of scenes, it's like a weird, like all of the other things, the hooks and the pulling your body apart, you can distance yourself from it, but an everyday thing like a nail, or if someone's chopping something in a film and you're like, they're going to cut their hand, I'm waiting for them to cut their finger off or something like that, that's the one that makes you go, oh no. But suddenly you see a guy get torn apart, his skin torn off, and you're like, yeah, it's gross, but it's not going to happen to me, right?
Yeah, it's par for the course, you know. But yeah, I mean, it kind of sets up, you know, a whole kind of, that's the catalyst, isn't it? That he gets a really deep cut as well. There's so much blood. That's the one thing that stuck out. I was like,
Boring.
yeah, I was like, fucking hell. How much blood does this man have?
It's just like Monty Python levels of like comedy blood.
Yeah.
And a flesh wound.
It's just over. It's another one of those signs of what was going through Clive Barker's head. Is like, as a director, like, right, that's not enough blood.
Yeah,
it just needs
Pour
more.
some more cornstarch on that, please.
Yeah, like when Kylo Ren's just screaming more. It's just like how much? He's leaked like 8 pints of blood. I'm fine. Yeah, but Frank's reanimation is so good. You know. To jump to that scene, it's just incredible. I think it's one of the when people look at body horror and kind of special effects of the 80s, a lot of people forget about it, I think, because it looks so good. I mean, I don't have a clue how they filmed it. You know, I'm not sure if it was done in reverse or anything like that, but
it looks like it was in reverse when you watch it. Like, it feels like it was shot in reverse. But part of my brain is like, claymation.
That's what I was thinking, maybe claymation.
Like that, it's claymation.
But it looks too real.
Yeah.
It looks too real to be claymation. That's the problem. It's also,
I think it does look well sculpted, but I don't know if it's claymation or if it's like full on more like wax kind of figures that they've used to break down.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I'm right in saying that Robbie's right. I think it is a reverse. So I remember seeing something about how they filmed it. And I think it was reverse shot. So the model is there, and then they kind of like reverse the footage so that the model goes like down into the ground, as opposed, or however way.
They're just melting a wax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what was making me think of wax, because I'm feeling like they would melt it. It's something that they could melt down to create that kind of reverse, kind of to make it look so cool.
Yeah.
In that kind of way, and wax figures
That
are good
is
to
a
melt.
good show.
Yeah, it probably is.
As we found out from that fact on Twitter, one of the people who follows us tweeted both of our podcasts saying that Clive Barker went into a library and found 2 books on filmmaking, and they only had like one in the library. So that was how he directed this movie, just by reading one.
Which is absolutely
how can I make this look real?
Yeah, that's insane that you could just be like, oh, I'm just gonna make a film. I'm just gonna get a book from the library and just read it and just make a cult classic, you know, and then that spawns 10 sequels.
I mean, it's definitely. I mean, this film's definitely made by the special effects in this film.
Yeah.
It is so it just adds to it. I mean, it's not that Julia and Larry. It's not like they're the most like drawn in. Frank's a full on. You know,
Frank's old school.
Like you look at Larry. I mean, who's choosing Larry over Frank?
Yeah,
I mean. You aren't jumping into that. I mean, you're even choosing, I assume, Pinhead over Larry.
And that's it.
I'm choosing Pinhead over Frank, though, to be fair.
Right. I would fuck Kirsty's non-existent boyfriend, Steve, over Larry.
Yeah. I mean, Larry's just like a drain, isn't he?
Yeah. Larry's so... And that's it. Like, usually, if somebody turns up, if the villain turns up, and plows like one of the main characters' wives, you're supposed to be like, oh God, I hate that guy, you know, I hate him. But Frank, you're kind of like, I'll let you off, you know, Larry's a shit.
Literally, she's gone out to bar, she's got some dudes, she's brought him back with all of these dudes that she can get, and yet you're still like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd go that far to bang Frank.
Yeah, and I love it. Look, Frank is definitely a sexual man, but I just love that it has this, it almost feels a little bit melodramatic, daytime soapish, where, you know, after they have sex, Frank's like, it's never enough. And then just like storms out with a cigarette, you know, and it feels very melodramatic and something you'd see in a soap opera. But it's, I don't know why.
It's that those parts of the film that occasionally were like, when I was first watching it, I remember being like, oh, maybe I'm not going to enjoy this as much, because it is you have to get used to. It's not quite what you're expecting to see in this kind of film.
No.
Dramatic. Yeah. And he's all like, it's not enough. Like, I'm not being funny, but I watched that scene. It doesn't look especially interesting. It looks like you had just a little bit over the edge of vanilla sex.
Yeah.
Like maybe go for BDSM club, see how you feel later. Like
Yeah.
I feel like Simon's more close to it. He's saying it was his first boob, so there's a part of him that's always going to be like, that was hella erotic.
Yeah, that was erotic.
Like, genuinely, when we rewatched this movie when we covered it, I hadn't really seen it since I was probably like 8 or 9, and I was like, I remember this movie being way more gory, there being way more tits in this film, and I was like, did my brain just imagine this? Because I was like, oh my god, there's boobs. Like, did I imagine this movie being like way sexier than it is?
you were like every person who's into women watching Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I know the exact second Phoebe Cates takes her top off in that movie. Like, who doesn't? And it's like the same with this movie. Like,
It's 53 minutes and 5 seconds, right?
yeah.
Well,
Guys.
the most central thing when I was young, I remember, was the it was when we got a PlayStation 1, and it was one of the SmackDown games, had a loading screen of Trish Stratus, and I was like, every time I'd play, I'd be like, please be that loading screen, and I was like 8 or 9, and it was amazing, you know.
I was gonna say I can't even remember what. It was probably something like Nadia and American Pie or something. I don't know, probably some random thing like that. I feel like we're not.
Tell you, it's not my first tits, but the first time I watched a sex scene in a film, and it was really awkward because I was with my mum and my stepdad, and we watched Queen of the Damned.
Oh yeah,
oh yeah.
The scene of Lestat and Akasha in the pool.
Yeah, that one's quite full on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like sat there in between my mum and my stepdad, like I can't look away because they know I've seen it.
Oh, there's nothing worse than the sat in the middle while you're watching a sex scene kind of like I think it wasn't even a bad one. It was like Moulin Rouge or something like that, which has a kind of sex scene in it, but it's not like full on or anything. But when you're sat in a room with your cousins, your grandma, and everyone, and you're sat watching that scene, it's like, oh, kill me.
Yeah.
Come on, take me into that hell world.
Yeah.
We're talking like relatively recently. We had Christmas at my mum's house.
Oh god.
And it was me.
We didn't watch her mum. Like
no, me, my mum, Simon, my mum's now husband, and my granddad, and we watched Love Actually.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
I was literally trying
I
to
always
think.
forget those scenes.
Love Actually so many times, and I'd completely forgotten about the fucking porn scene.
Yes.
Yeah, the Martin Freeman with I can't remember what her name is, out of Gavin and Stacey, and they're doing the sex.
Yeah.
I forget that every time it comes on.
When you mentioned, we were watching a Christmas film, I was thinking, what Christmas film has like banging in? And then as soon as you said Love Actually, it was like a PTSD flashback. I was like, oh no.
I wasn't even that bothered that it was my mum, but it's like my 70-year-old granddad.
Yeah.
I did not realise we were going to discover a Hellraiser to Love Actually pipeline.
Yeah,
this is here, and
it could be a crossover.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we've got men and women here. So when's the first time you saw Hang Dong?
I can actually answer that one. Train Spotting. Ewan McGregor, Train Spotting.
Ah, fair enough.
I don't know if to this day someone's dick in a film.
Yeah, I don't know.
I still don't think to this day. X.
Yeah, because we saw Kids Cuddies in X.
I don't think the
we haven't seen
X, but
hanging dog in a film.
I
still haven't seen X. I really want to see it.
I'm sure a dude hangs dong in A Knight's Tale.
A Knight's Tale? No.
Yeah.
I saw that when I was like 11 in the
Yeah,
cinema.
so
Dude
did I.
definitely doesn't hang dong.
I don't know if he does.
You see ass.
I think
You see Paul Bettany's ass.
You see Paul
It's
Bettany's
Paul Bettany's ass.
I thought you might see
He's
Paul
not
Bettany's
hanging dong though. You're imagining hanging.
Maybe I've just got Paul Bettany's dong on my mind. You know.
Yeah, so we're an advocate for the more hanging dong.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. The scene in Pop Star.
When
Pop
he signed
Star,
for
Never
this.
Stop, Never Stopping.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
yeah,
was-
yeah.
Dude's dick.
I can't actually remember the first dong I saw on video.
It's not quite the same experience for a straight man to be
No,
like,
it's
that's
not.
dong.
No, it's not. Yeah.
I think it was. I can't even remember what the film is. It was Bruce Willis in there's some film where he has like this crazy girlfriend who and they like in a pool, and there's just a scene where just basically it's Bruce Willis's dong just across the screen.
Why do I feel like I know that film? It's not.
It's not a good film, but
the whole 9 yards.
No,
No?
That's not about Crazy Ex. That's about Matthew Perry getting up to
Maybe
ridiculous
do you
things.
see Bruce's Willie?
Yeah, I don't know. I just heard that film, and I saw it when it came out because it was on the back of Chandler Bing, and I watched it, and I was about 8 or something, and I don't know what happened.
You just spent so long watching Friends that you just wanted to see Chandler's
Chandler
dong.
Bing. And I was like, oh,
There is not a porn parody of that movie called The Whole 9 Inches. Then what are we even doing?
I know. That's it.
It all exists. Let's be honest. It's perfectly poised for it.
Also,
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
just, since we mentioned this, to bring it back to Hellraiser, I am surprised there are not more Hellraiser porn parodies in
Are
the
there
world.
any?
There must be,
I
surely.
would have a look now.
Can we go look up porn quickly?
Yeah, I'm gonna look at. I mean, keep
He's
talking.
just do it, midway through.
Otherwise, so apparently the Hellraiser porn parody Cockraiser. It's a bit. It's funny, but
It's on the nose.
it's a bit too.
Obvious.
You know, could have had something a bit better. I feel.
Cock raiser. Is that the only one you can find? Cock raiser.
Apparently, Cockraiser. You just.
It will tear your whole apart.
Yeah, we'll tear your whole apart. There you go. That could be the tagline.
I mean, to be fair, the original film has enough dirty lines and things. I mean, literally, Pinhead says, "You open it, we come. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasure." I mean, if that's not basically a porn line turned into a horror
Also,
line.
when Chatterer turns up, he shoves his 2 fingers in Kirsty's
does.
mouth and fingers her mouth for a little bit.
yeah,
as well.
that's a bit
That
eroticism.
dirty little bastard. He was
Also,
like,
yeah, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Chatterer's name is James.
I mean,
Not when
the actor or the
Yes,
character?
no, the character. Before he became the Chatterer, his name's James. So if you go on his Wikipedia or his Hellraiser equivalent, it just says aliases James, which I don't know why. I just found that so funny. And he actually, the actor who played the Chatterer, he is in Hellraiser 2 as the character who thinks he's covered in the maggots. Yeah, absolutely gross scene. And I think that I'm glad I'm not the only one who's so grossed out by maggots, because I remember the first time I watched Ghost Ship, and Carl Urban and his mate find all of the old food that's in a tin, and they crack into it and they're eating, and then it cracks to them eating maggots. And then every time I would have rice, it would be, these are maggots, and it's so gross.
Why did maggots at all?
Oh, that's
But
so
I
gross.
used to fish, so you have to get used to handling maggots.
Yeah, I just think they're so gross.
Because no, not even. I remember once we'd gone fishing and the maggots. It was so cold. My dad, the maggots started to get really slouchy and sloppy, and my dad was like, "You just put them between your lips."
Ugh.
you literally just put the word maggot and sloppy in the same word.
Yeah, and in your mouth.
Sloppy maggots in your mouth.
Yeah, I'm assuming my dad was fucking with me. I didn't do it. I'm assuming my dad was fucking with me.
Hopefully.
But he was really trying to convince me, and I was like,
I'm going to start calling you old maggot mouth now.
Oh, maggot mouth.
one of the girls in my year at school did, though, for a science experiment at school. Yorkshire, they were even maggots in your mouth.
Yeah.
I love that there's all this disgusting stuff in Hellraiser. The only thing that's grossed us out so far is a nail on a hand and maggots.
Yeah.
Yeah, of all of the stuff that happens in this film.
Yeah.
I mean, so far, I mean, I knew that this film was going to take us on, but I didn't expect a long tangent on first boobs, hanging dong,
Yeah.
and maggots in mouth.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I will be really interested to see in the new one is what is the new Cenobites, because the 4 that we get, particularly in this I think they're so iconic. The first, I actually do remember the first time I watched this. I watched this years ago with a friend of ours, Sam, and the only reason why I remember watching it is because both of us got so disgusted by the Cenobites, but completely different ones. I found the Chatterer to be gross for some reason. I don't know what it was, but then Sam was so grossed out by Butterball, the larger lad with the glasses. I don't know why he took shades, but it was just, I don't know why. And then even the female Cenobite is, with her throat cut open.
Yeah, she's the one that sticks with me with her like throat ripped open.
Yeah,
the homemade tracheotomy.
Yeah.
And she does this kind of cat-like wail throughout the film.
Yeah.
And I think they're so gross. And
but that's kind of, I feel that's kind of the point though, isn't it? I feel like they're both they're all linked to like almost different body forms, different perspectives of humans, and you're going to be drawn to one. It's definitely the throat one with me. It's going to be. I've got a whole thing about don't go near my throat.
Yeah.
I don't let anyone touch my throat.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's a weird thing. I always think in the cinema someone's going to slice my throat.
Yeah.
Specific fear.
It is.
It's odd. I don't know where it came from. I think Scream, a couple of the throat slittings in Scream back in the day threw me off them.
Yeah.
Or some other film.
I'm probably going to expose more of myself on this podcast now by saying this. But I think also the idea of it is meant to be kind of like the whole idea of the film itself is things that would generally repulse you, you're kind of attracted to. So it kind of goes into the whole like coming out about your kinks and about like pleasure and pain. And you're supposed to find these characters repulsive, but there is something oddly alluring about them. Like, would you fuck the female Cenobite? Probably.
Yeah.
Would you try probably. But you're supposed to be repulsed by her.
Yeah.
Same as Pinhead, same as like Chatterer, but there is something that is like deeply sexual about them. And I think that's kind of the idea of like when people explore the darker side of like relationships and sexuality, there are things that naturally you're scared of or you would be repulsed by. And I think that's kind of what they're supposed to represent. But they are kind of, you do look at them, you're like, I could not imagine shagging Butterball. He looks like a melted ice cream man. Like, you know what I mean?
That really gets me about this whole situation though.
Oh god, here we go.
Because obviously Frank decides to get the lament configuration to summon the Cenobites because he wants to experience like the greatest pain and pleasure.
Yeah.
However, when he's fucking Julia earlier in the film, or later in the film, earlier in his life, like a very like dom overtone. And I'm like, are you a switch? Do you know which way you're falling? Because you've gone from being a dom to kind of being a very strong sub, like my love.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know really how all of this works.
He went from top to bottom real quickly.
Yeah. I guess that's it. He's just getting stuck in. As
quickly as he could, didn't he?
Yeah. But I mean, Frank is himself I think he's such he's a great character. He's so kind of horrid and he's so kind of he's a bit like he's almost similar to the Cenobites in that is that his actions are some of the stuff that he does is so like repulsive and taboo and just then you can't help to be just watch him and think that he's just a fascinating character. You
said this, didn't you? There's like the whole implication that he wants to fuck Kirsty.
Yeah.
That whole
there
come
is.
to daddy thing every time just makes me cringe internally.
Oh, it's gross.
Yeah, there's a definite theme through that.
Yeah.
It's all about the implication.
All about the implication.
Kind of what Robbie said there makes an interesting point as well, because obviously in the later films, like in the second one especially, you see like Chenard get turned into a Cenobite, and you see like all of the other characters in the third one get turned into Cenobites. Now, we talk about Frank, we talk about Julia, because obviously in the second one, Julia is skinless and all that sort of stuff. What is it about those two characters that meant that they weren't eligible to become Cenobites? Because you mentioned Frank being like this really evil, kind of like morally bankrupt character. Surely he would be the ideal candidate for them to turn into a Cenobite, but it never really seems that way.
There's a comment that Pinhead makes where it's when Kirsty says to them, like, I know where Frank is, I can give them back to you. And Pinhead makes a comment about wanting his confession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's part of it, because neither of them ever confess to what they've done.
Maybe, yeah. I didn't think of
like
it
that must be a requirement.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think whilst
I think embrace it. There is a little bit of that embracing the evil that you've done.
Yeah.
Thing about it. That kind of, you need to give in, but you also need to fully embrace what's going to come before. So if you're not embracing the horrors that you've done or the wrong deeds that you've created, then you're not going to take to almost our level of
maybe
the Cenobite.
But whilst we kind of, because we haven't really spoke about Kirsty a whole lot, and I think Kirsty and Ashley Lawrence, Bay. I think she's a great kind of final girl. I always thought that not only was she kind of extremely kind of good looking, which I think is obvious to anybody with eyes, but I always thought that she looked a lot like Winona Ryder.
Yes.
Yeah, she looks a lot like Winona Ryder. But she's as a character, it's strange because we're introduced to her and then we go long periods of time without seeing her. And she does have this random, like, shitty boyfriend. Like, there's that point where, they're at a dinner party and then he puts like a cigarette in his mouth and she's really impressed by that. And I was like, what? I was like, why are you so impressed by that? Like,
it doesn't quite track with the rest of her character.
No.
I mean, to be the fact that she's like the daughter of Cuck Daddy makes me kind of think that she's easily impressed by anything because he's such a wet fish of a human being. She's probably like, oh my god, like I'm so dangerous and bad.
I put a cigarette in my mouth.
He almost makes her want to be like the rebel, doesn't she?
Yeah,
she is trying a bit to be.
And it's a shame because we get her a lot more in the sequel. But in this film, she's kind of established relatively early on, but then we don't see her for large chunks. I'm sure maybe there's like 25 minutes, half an hour where we don't really see her, and it focuses on Julia going to these bars and meeting these men. And there was a really funny thing that you found where one of the guys felt that because obviously Julia's meeting these men at bars and then is luring them up into the attic for Frank to kill so he can come back. There was a really interesting bit where Julia murders one of them, and the actor playing the victim, I'm not sure which one exactly it is. I think it may be the first one which we see properly kind of get into his undies, and apparently that character felt that it made sense for him to get fully naked, so they shot it of him fully naked. And then they were like, no, actually put your pants on. And I just find it really funny that this actor who probably, had a really small role was just like, why don't I just be naked? It's kind of like a really random thing to bring in.
I kind of get it though, because you look at the type of men that she's luring back. It kind of almost speaks to, I guess, his character would just be so excited that a woman like that would pay him any attention that the first thing he would do is just get naked, like excitedly.
No foreplay, nothing. Just drops trowel straight away. Just stands there.
It's really interesting though, because you mentioned about Kirsty, and obviously in this movie we never get a sense of the sort of final girl. I think this movie is part of the reason why she's probably not as well regarded by many in the kind of pantheon of final girls, and obviously she gets a lot more to do in the sequel. The sequel is basically like her movie for the majority of it. But she actually does come back in one of the sequels, and she's married, and it's like 25 years later, and she gets killed, and it's all about like her husband kind of dealing with her death and stuff like that, and it's kind of a weird ending for her character. But then I don't know if you guys know, in the most recent run of the comics, she actually becomes Pinhead.
Yeah, I heard that she becomes a Cenobite in one of
them.
So
it's kind of interesting as well to kind of see them because there's no sense of how she would react if she was taken to the hell world in the comics. Like, you never get the sense of she's interested in that kind of thing, or she's interested in opening the box. She just wants to close it and just fuck off with Steve and go work at a pet shop. Interesting in turns that they take her character in. But one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, I actually have a question. I feel proud.
Lovely. Prepared.
How do you guys feel about Julia always being envisioned as the main villain of the franchise? Because Clive Barker said he saw Julia being the main villain of the franchise. And obviously, in the first two movies, they do wrap up the story. But how would you have felt if the franchise had solely been the Julia show rather than sort of becoming about Pinhead?
I don't really know. I mean, because like you said, we get in the first film, obviously the one we're discussing today, she is more kind of subservient to Frank, and she is very much Frank's minion. And then in the second film, obviously Julia comes back without the skin this time, and she takes on a more villainous role. And we do briefly see Frank in hell, which is a beautiful scene. But in terms of her being kind of a villain going forward, I don't know. It's hard because the lament configuration and the Cenobites and Pinhead in particular is so iconic now. It's hard to think of Hellraiser as a franchise without Pinhead. I mean, if you were to show somebody Pinhead and they have a relatively decent knowledge of films, then they would probably call him Hellraiser. I have heard people before call Pinhead Hellraiser. So he's so kind of integral to the franchise, and my kind of suspicions is that they focus too much on Pinhead in the further sequels, that they kind of get away from a lot of the actual story and it being about the lament configuration. But I don't know. I don't think it would have been. I mean, I was about to say, I don't think the franchise would have done as well, but it's known to be quite a shit franchise after the second film. So I don't know, but I can't imagine it getting to its 11th film if it had just been Julia, to be honest.
Not without Pinhead, but then because I hadn't really read into that fit. I'd heard that kind of idea before, but I'd never really read into it. But from what I had heard of it, I always thought that was more from the perspective of the idea that Clive Barker always saw that the Cenobites actually were never the villains of the piece. When I watched the film, I never actually get the feeling like Pinhead and the Cenobites actually are really the monsters. I get the feeling like they're the ones almost doling out the justice that's given to me. Like, for instance, in the first one, Frank is, but I could also see how Clive Barker could see it as Julia is almost the villain of these, in the way of what the Cenobites are trying to achieve. And almost with Clive Barker's gothic kind of weird mind, that in his mind, the Cenobites are actually the one who are doling out the justice within our worlds, and that Julie is actually the one that gets in the way constantly of this within the first two films. But I had actually heard the whole that she's actually would have been the full-on villain in that way. I can't even imagine how that would work in my head. I can't even see how that would go, especially not replacing Pinhead.
I think that's Clive Barker's big talent though, is you look at his monsters. Pinhead's not really a villain, he does what he does because that's what he does. Candyman's not really a villain.
No.
And what are they called? The creatures?
Nightbreed.
The Nightbreed. They're not villains. They're the monsters of the film, but they're not the villains.
They do what they do, don't they?
Yeah. They're just trying to survive. And I feel like it's the same with Candyman. He's just trying to get revenge for what happened. And Pinhead's really just doing his job. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of it. It's an
odd S&M job, but it's an odd.
Somebody's got to do it, okay?
Somebody's got to do it.
Barker's monsters is that none of them are actually monsters. It's normally the humans that are the monsters in his stories, which I really love, and I think it's a very Clive Barker-esque view of
I love it too. There's the fact, and that's what I said about the Julia and Frank part is fine to me. I like them in that kind of weird, the fact that they've got this weird eroticism throughout it. But as I said about the special effects, and with the special effects come the Cenobites. And he gives this weird kind of emotional layer to the monsters that you don't get in many horror. He really knows how to handle. I kind of always wish that Clive Barker would work a little bit more with someone else, like his ideas, his approach to monsters. But I feel like he needs some help in the other scripting areas of his story sometimes. And you would have a master, if you could get someone who's a little bit more with the human characters and he could take the monsters, like if you could get someone who's really good at character-driven pieces, you could have a masterpiece of horror if you balance it out a little bit more. Candyman obviously is very good in some ways for human parts and the monstrous parts, but I do think there's that balance there that I do love, that like almost deeper layer that we have with it, and how Pinhead is born. Is that, am I mixing up films in my head? Is this do we see how Pinhead's this
that's
sequel,
the
isn't it? Or is it the third
that's
one?
the third one.
Is it the third one?
Yeah,
I'm
the third one
jumping, my mind's jumping somewhere else.
In this one, I mean,
So in 2, you see him in the human form for
Yeah.
the first time. You see
Yeah.
them all.
The third one, when
The
you get
third one,
Elliot's backstory.
yeah.
Elliot
They claim-
Spencer, that whole thing.
Soldier in World War II.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But-
that's the part I remember.
I haven't seen the second or third, but I know all about his backstory because of fucking Tumblr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he has the same name as a character in a show I love. So whenever I search that,
It just
brings
comes
up
up.
about Pinhead, and I'm like, oh, now I know the backstory. That's
Yeah.
bad.
Well, I mean, speaking about the Cenobites and the role in the story, it is that we see them at the start, and then they're kind of leaked throughout the film. When Frank first comes back, he's like, they can't find me. He doesn't kind of explicitly go the Cenobites and then give us loads of kind of info dump, but they're kind of dropped in and out. But apparently, they were never supposed to get kind of as big as they did, and Pinhead wasn't supposed to be so much the leader of them. But when you look at a lot of the iconic quotes of Pinhead, and then Friday we'll see the 11th film in the franchise coming out, but so a lot of them are in the first one. So you get the box, you opened it, we came, no tears please, it's a waste of good suffering, we have such sights to show you, we'll tear your soul apart, this isn't for your eyes. I love that one. I always use that one.
I mean,
at
that's
work.
he got the best lines. Yeah,
That's my favorite one as well.
Angels to some, demons to others.
Yeah.
is my. I just love that line. It's so optimum.
So I haven't seen the rest of the films. I've only seen this one, and I know apparently after 3 it drops in quality significantly. But is 3 not the last one we have Doug?
No.
Doug
Doug Bradley's.
Do all of the Doug.
He
Doug
did-
Bradley's in 8 of them. Then 9
Oh, wow.
is a different guy. 10's a different guy.
See, I like Doug.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of the other Pinheads, and they don't look right.
They don't,
It
do
really-
they?
is
they
it?
don't.
Is it
I really
blood? Is Bloodlines the one where he looks really weird? Like everyone always points out how odd it is. Is it Bloodline? Is it Bloodlines?
I
or-
don't know.
So Bloodline is the 4th one.
That's
that's the 4th one.
Revelation or Judgment are the 2, where it's a different guy. I think Judgment is the one where he looks like he's a guy wearing a rubber mask.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Robert, yeah,
A friend of ours actually got a rubber Pinhead mask for Halloween, and it was like 10 quid. They got it from eBay or something, and they said it's the most ridiculous thing, and it just stinks of fags. It just smells of cigarettes so much they couldn't wear it. I'll try and find a picture and
The
send it
wish
to you.
mask.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like a wish mask.
Doug's performance is really what makes Pinhead. And I think if they'd have had anyone else play him, I don't know if the character would have become as beloved. Well,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing Jamie play her iteration.
Yes, it'll be really interesting.
Forward to
won't
seeing
it?
Jamie's version.
Yeah, I don't like because obviously there is loads of backlash and things like that. Not to delve into right now, but I don't get, because obviously we know that it's described as a creature who's not meant to be of any specific gender or origin. It's meant to look as if they are completely. And if you've seen the pictures of what Jamie looks like, matches the bill. I wouldn't necessarily say it's female or male. It just is whatever that is that you're looking at is just it is a complete they of a creature.
Yeah, and that's it. There was massive upheaval about it, wasn't it? It's strange when anybody kind of makes that much of a fuss about films, but a small part of me gets it, because if you grow up with a film and then it's such a part of you, and you have such a fondness to it, if somebody suddenly wants to like change it, it's kind of like, why? You've got that. But so there's a small part of me who can kind of understand it, but a large part does think like, it's entertainment, it's a film. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see what Jamie does.
Yeah.
And I know we're watching it together, so don't have to for it, but I might watch it with my mum.
I
Hellraiser is my mum's favourite film.
Yeah, do it.
Really?
Has been. I remember being a kid and like the video cupboard. I'm older. The video cupboard, like we had the Hellraiser box set on video with Pinhead down the side of it.
Yes, I've seen that, but
Yeah.
I've never had it.
Had that, and it was like in the back of the video cupboard when I was a kid. So I knew who Pinhead was from a very young age. I want to see what my mum makes of Jamie as
Yeah. And
Pinhead.
Yeah.
And I think it gets like another thing is as much as we love these kind of like iconic characters, you've got to remember that, you know, this film was like 40 years ago and people age. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw the Freddie Robert England came back for it was like a Mad TV or something like that, like 5 years ago. Yeah, he did. You know, he came back as Freddy Krueger for a little skit, the Goldbergs, yeah. And it was great for a little skit, but I wouldn't want to watch a film of that because it was very clear that this is like a 70-year-old man who's acting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, yes, I you know, I think Doug Bradley is incredible as Pinhead, but he isn't, you know, 30 or 40 years old anymore. Like if we get a Pinhead and it's Doug Bradley, are they going to digitally, you know, de-age him? How are they going to do it without it looking like Pinhead? Your granddad's come to take your soul, you know? It's unfortunate, but it kind of gets to that, you know? Yeah, you know?
What do you guys think of Pinhead in like the pantheon of horror characters? Obviously, in this movie, he's used quite sparingly, but like I think his entrance, the first time you see him, is absolutely iconic. And how do you guys view him in the larger world when you put him against guys like Freddy, Jason, Chucky, etc.?
I mean, for personal perspective, I mean, I guess because I knew Pinhead, because I hadn't seen the film for such a long time, he doesn't get to higher bar for me as say Michael or Freddy, or you know, I appreciate it. Like as you said, that opening scene, and again, part of what makes this amazing, as I mentioned to you earlier, Rob, was how good the theme of this film is how powerful it is right from the opening. It makes him scarier. There's something about the character that just adds to it. That music in the background adds the theme, but also the fact that he has the best lines. He has lines that I do think, because we were talking about Clive Barker before the writer. I think there is so poetic about Clive Barker's writing. The way he describes things like is so poetic in that way. It sounds almost like you're doing some kind of metaphors, you know, like you're really going into deeper imagery with the way he's talking about things. For me, that's the part that raises Pinhead to that kind of level. Like the deaths obviously are incredible, but that kind of way that he talks, and he has such a kind of non-reaction at times. It's literally he is just observing. He's standing. There's a complete part of it where you look at him like he is looking at them like they're a certain eternal. There's non-ending here. Like he's lived so long and he can just see it like playing out. And he's like, you are nothing to me, that I kind of love about him. But because all the others came first in my repertoire, I think they still are slightly higher for me.
I mean, there's all you've got like your big three, you know, Michael, Freddy, and Jason, who are obviously, you know, they're the goats and they're at the top of the pile. I would put him, you know, Pinhead. I'd stick him in your B ranking, you know, your category B. He's up there for me. I'd put him up there with Candyman, with Chucky. I don't particularly like Chucky, but I put
three favorites.
Yeah, I put them in
for
B
people.
ranking.
We're having literal physical reactions.
Yes, we are.
We're having that. We did an episode before this, and Rob had a bit of that when I said I'm not a fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, you know, but yeah, that's
there you go. He's walking away.
He's left the building.
Literally say he's going to leave.
But I said I'd choke you like Homer Simpson.
You said after you're going to choke me to death, but right now we'll keep recording.
We'll keep civil. So yeah, I think, you know, he's an iconic character. Chucky's iconic. Candyman's iconic. But I don't think they're quite up there for me.
So like Freddy, Michael, Jason. So
They're the
basically,
top
we're
three.
basic horror bitches.
Yeah,
we like the most basic of ones.
Like, I think you could show a picture of Chucky to somebody and they'd be like, I think he's in, he's in that film about a kid.
They'd say he's in Chucky.
They might
wouldn't
say he's in
Child's
Chucky.
Play. They'd say he's in Chucky.
They might say that. And you could show a picture of Pinhead to somebody and they'd probably go, yeah, I've seen that guy about, But it's not like, oh yeah, I know that. I've seen that film or anything, That's for me. That's where I'd put him. I'd put him in B, He's a strong one, but he's not quite the GOAT, What about you guys?
So I kind of agree with what you guys kind of said. I would probably swap out Michael Myers though and put him along, because I'm not a huge fan of Michael Myers. I find Michael Myers to be
all right, let's end this.
That's
I mean, this is
he's
my
my
guy,
number one, so that's me.
He's
this is
my
my guy, Jason. So I'd have Jason and Freddy and probably Pinhead, but I think that's just because I'm a fucking weird perv, and I'm like,
yeah.
But it's fascinating though, because he like we this is one thing we discovered when we started doing the podcast is I grew up with like Freddy, Jason, and Michael, much like yourselves. So those are like my go-to guys. Whereas since we've been doing the podcast, Lee's discovered that she likes sort of other characters, haven't you?
Yeah. So my like top horror characters are like Pinhead, Candyman,
Yeah.
Chucky and Tiffany. I like them as a set.
Hmm.
And then probably like Sam from Trick or Treat
And Ash from
and Ash from Evil
Oh,
Dead.
Ash is class.
Don't rate Freddy, Michael, or Jason. In fact, they're really low. The only thing that makes me like Jason at all is there's a comic book called Camp Counselor Jason.
Nice.
If you've ever seen it, she's on like Instagram, but she makes comic books of Jason, but it's like if Jason was just one of the camp counselors. He's still scarred and wears his mask. But it's him like working at the camp and hanging out with the kid. He goes on a date with Carrie at one point, and he hangs out with Michael and Laurie as like they're like actual siblings and just really friendly.
I love it. I'm gonna have to see that.
Like the sole reason that I actually like any of those characters is that comic book. They can't stand. Freddy, I think, is the most overrated horror villain in existence.
Nah.
Sorry. I can't. That movie, that first Friday the 13th movie, is the most boring. Nightmare on Elm Street movie is the most boring pile of shit, closely followed by Halloween.
Part of the reason why
I'm ending.
Yeah.
Halloween.
Because part of the reason why I brought up the Pinhead thing is at two various different points, he has nearly crossed over with the big three.
Yeah.
He was originally meant to be in the original ending of Freddy versus Jason. So there was a pitched ending for Freddy versus Jason where they get pulled to hell, and he is in hell, and you see him as the hell priest. The chains come up, they pull them down, and he looks at them both and says, "So what appears to be the problem, gentlemen?" And that was how the film was going to end.
I'd have loved that.
And then I watched something the other day where he was originally at one point going to cross over with Michael Myers.
Yes.
And they were going to do a film called Helloween. And like they were talking about all the different options of like how basically, I think the long and the short of it was that Michael Myers was a Cenobite, basically. So little mini Michael Myers got hold of the box when he was a kid, basically got taken over by a Cenobite, and that was why he's unkillable. So
there's a band somewhere that wants to have a word about that.
I kind of wondered if him crossing over with those, like basically when they made Freddy vs. Jason, New Line and Warner Brothers went, no, the character's too low rent. It's not going to do anything for our sales. But like, I wondered if him crossing over with any of those characters would have made him more popular. But then I'm like, I don't know, because it's different audiences, I feel like. So,
yeah, it is. And
I feel like it would have made him more popular.
Yeah.
I feel like jumping into that, I feel like they might have redesigned him a little bit to make him fit in, like the way he acts, the way he talks. They might have tried to fit it more in with those franchise, which might have been bad. Or, I mean, Halloween alone, for a horror fan, like I would check it out completely, but it sounds like a terrible film.
Well, actually,
that's in the Halloween resurrection kind of phase of like, what can we do now? We've run out of things to do.
Whilst we talk about Halloween, I might have watched a similar video to you, but they then came up with one called Halloween in Hell, which was the second one. And it was going to be a similar-ish idea. And they were going to have Kirsty Lawrence come back, and Michael was going to kill her, and she was going to say to Pinhead, at least you didn't get me. And that's, why they were going to fight. But then they tried to come up with a way in which they could do it. And they approached both Clive Barker to write the story and John Carpenter to direct it. And they both said, yes, they do it, because apparently they're both massive fans of each other's work. But then Mustafa Akkad, who's the producer of Halloween and kind of the rights holder, he has some very strict rules about what can happen. And one of them is that, this is what I find really funny. He says that one of them is that Michael has to stay grounded, so he can't cross over with the Cenobites, but it's fine for him to be, cursed by ancient druids. That's completely fine.
Or to hang out with Busta Rhymes.
Yeah, So it's a really weird concept, but it would have been it. I would have watched that film. It would be really, I think it probably would have been shit, but I'd have watched it, just for the sake of it.
Oh yeah, it was a Joe Blow video I watched.
That's it. That's what I watched. Yeah.
We mentioned, because Josh Stolberg, who wrote the last two Saw movies, he was one of the guys. He did Sorority Row and the last two Saw movies. He was one of the writers on one of the original pictures, and he follows both of our accounts on Twitter. And I kind of DM'd him the other day, and I was like, "Simon, I'm gonna talk to you about that unmade Halloween movie." And I was like, he was very tight-lipped about it. And I was like, "Oh, I wonder if it's something he can't talk about." But I tried to kind of
that'd be awesome.
A bit more information.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so good, man.
All of these alternative films, these worlds that we
could have had, man.
To be fair, one thing that I love about this is the crazy alternative titles that we could have had for this film. for Hellraiser, the ones that were thrown around, which just sound like they weren't actual titles, and yet they're things that they've got on record to say, we were literally considering ones like Sadomasochists from Beyond the Grave. Which
they sound like a band that would open up for Sisters of Mercy.
They do.
Yeah.
Earlier I thought it was Sodomists from Beyond the Grave, but that was.
I got it wrong, doesn't it? The other
still has the eroticism, I guess.
And Barker, he says one of the very English proper ladies working on the set, who said her idea was it should be called "What a Woman Will Do for a Good Fuck."
Yeah. Beans. Yeah.
She's not wrong.
She's not. I mean, she kind of is wrong, because Frank doesn't, like you said earlier, it's not. It doesn't look like it was an insane fuck,
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Just a little bit of piping, There wasn't anything too insane, Yeah,
I think that's enough. I think that was due to the studio being like. Clive Barker has said they filmed and had much more sex in the script. They had things like spanking involved and all of this kind of, and the studio were just like, no, we're not having any of that. So he had to replace all of the erotic sex with a flip knife. Basically, is what he said.
Yeah,
tone it down, Clive. Tone it down.
Yeah, tone it down.
Spanking in this movie. I'm like, okay, and then 30 years later we got 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
So
the most mental thing is this video came out in this film came out in 1987. I'm gonna show you the other side of my interests now when I say this. 5 years later, Madonna released her sex book, and Madonna released all of the videos for erotic and stuff like that, where it's literally got pictures of her being bound up, spanked, slapped, choked, all kinds of shit in it. And you could buy that shit over the counter. And they're like, "No, man, we can't have some dowdy housewife getting spanked by her brother-in-law. It will ruin people's lives."
I literally that book, that's weird. That book, I'd literally never heard of the book before until the other week I was helping my dad clear out his attic, and I found that book in the middle of the attic. It was in a bit. It stands out because it's in this metal casing, and you're open. I was like, what the hell is this book? It literally could have been in a horror movie, what, I'm going to read this book now.
Yeah.
I shouldn't. But then it was just pictures of Madonna getting all kinds of things done to her. I was just like, I've never seen this before.
you can't have that. That's way too far. You actually see the scene at some point and literally just taps her on the bum and calls her a bad girl once. And they're like, too far.
Too far.
Yeah. Clive Barker actually said that the footage of the spanking scene after that happened, that they have no idea where it went. So they filmed it, but they have no idea where that. So somewhere out there, someone has this spanking scene.
Somebody's probably just
one day it will leak.
Yeah, one day it will leak. Well, I guess we should probably jump to the very end of the film when the Cenobites find. That was a long tangent.
That was a long tangent. I think the only thing
you have us on your podcast, you get tangents.
Yeah, that's it.
I think the only thing we didn't mention that I just like about the form is the best part of Frank's whole change is the skinless form.
Oh,
he's just there in the attic. I just want to
and
show the appreciation for how good he fucking looks in that scene.
Yeah.
And he's smoking a dart and he just looks cool.
In all the sequels actually as well, that form is just always amazing. Like just the way you look at it. But I always love that whole the blood coming down the wall as he's like writing with it like on the walls, and like him in that form is just that was probably my favorite part of the film in one way. Is just the part when he's just like hanging about, just skinless.
Yeah, it is so cool, man. But yeah, once we get to the actual scene where they kind of get Frank, and we get there and then we see that Frank's wearing his brother's skin, which is pretty fucked up. And then he kills Julia, doesn't he? And I never know if it's an accident or not. Because it kind of looks as if it is. It kind of looks as if it isn't. To me, it's always a bit ambiguous. Does he kill her?
The original stabbing is accidental because he's aiming for Kirsty.
Yeah.
But he follows through because he pulls the life out of her.
Yeah.
Because he says, he's like, it's nothing personal.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's accidentally, but then there is that full on just draining of just like, well, I guess I've done it now, so let's get on.
Now. Let's just kill her. Fuck it.
Let's drain this.
Well, I guess she's done all she needed for him, so boom, fuck it off her, and then
Oh, go. You guys go.
Yeah, you guys. You first, Simon.
I think one of the creepiest scenes in this movie is when he's got Larry's face on and he goes up to Kirsty and he goes, "Come to daddy."
Yeah.
While wearing her dad's face.
Again.
Like gag-inducing. You're just like, this dude not only wants to fuck his niece, but he wants to do it while wearing her dad's face.
It's fucked up, isn't it?
Reactor shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's so weird.
That's some deeply fucked up. That's more than Leatherface kind of level of fucked up kind of like skin wearing.
It's so class,
Now, that scene though, and that whole run up is obviously Kirsty rushes home. She's really worried that like Frank's gonna kill her dad, and then she sees her dad. But she's like, you look at him, and like it does look like the face is like quite sitting properly, and he's got all this gooey gunk all around his hairline. And she's not even a little bit suspicious.
Yeah, it's so weird. She's just
I'm a little bit suspicious about that, in all honesty. I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and then when his face droops down and he just like puts it back up, but then obviously the Cenobites catch him. And that's a really cool scene,
Maybe she just thinks he's catching a lot of nails today.
Maybe. Yeah, there's another nail he's fallen into. Nail after nail.
Also, what's the creature? So I think the scene I'm talking about is before. What's the big ass creature that chases Kirsty through the fucking hospital?
So it's called the Engineer, and apparently
that's my guy.
Yeah, he's my guy. He apparently they are designers of the hell, basically, and it's really interesting. I only caught this when I watched it last night as well. But the first time we see it, the Engineer, and the very first shot of it running after Kirsty, you could see the mechanism behind it that it's mounted on. You can very quickly see it kind of going along, like tracking. And then the other 2 or 3 shots you get of it, they must have clocked on and you can't see it anymore. But I went back and I watched it, and I watched it a couple of times just to make sure. But if you look down at the bottom, you can see like the wheels that they've obviously put this machine on. And it's so funny.
It's a great scene where Kirsty's blatantly running on a treadmill.
Yeah.
So obviously a treadmill is my favourite.
I love
thing.
it.
Yeah,
It's so good.
no, the engineers about that. They're
Yeah.
like, because it says it at first, doesn't it? Like they're redeemed as to be either angels or demons, but they're just explorers from another dimension.
Yeah. It's so cool. And when when she's in the hospital and she opens it, we first see the engineer, and then obviously we see him again later. He gets another appearance. But yeah, Frank's death as Larry it's so gross. Getting pulled apart with the trains, and it's I love it because it's so we get this like massive swell and orchestral pieces, and then it as it's kind of pulling him to his very kind of limit, everything just cuts out. And originally he was supposed to say "fuck you," but he ad-libbed saying "Jesus wept," which I just absolutely love. But I never know how to take it because there's so many different interpretations of it. I don't. How did you guys interpret that?
I think it's purposely ambiguous, but it kind of ties back to what you were saying about this always having been his destiny.
Yeah.
Like if you consider that the Cenobites collect souls, and if you believe in reincarnation, are we saying that Frank's soul is destined to be going into different vessels, which is why the gentleman says to him at the beginning, "It was always you."
Yeah.
Like it was always yours.
I was a previous victim.
Yeah, because there's the implication there that maybe in a past life Frank was privy to the crucifixion, and that's why he's in the kind of Christ-like pose, and he says Jesus wept, because he's kind of recounting something that he was witness to, and he's sympathizing in that moment of his moment of torture.
Yeah.
But then there's also just it's a really fucking cool line. So
Yeah.
look at it and how deep you want to think about it. Because it's kind of like an existential kind of franchise, isn't it? It's all about like, that kind of stuff.
I always kind of read it when he says the Jesus wept, because obviously the whole point of the Cenobites is pain and pleasure being mixed together, and how much pain before it is just pain and pure pleasure. I always read it as kind of like he realized that what it actually was, and it was kind of like I like this.
Okay, it's interesting.
He's a little kinky fucker.
I really thought when you were talking about that, you were going to go down the pain and pleasure route of So when Jesus was getting crucified,
he was right.
I'm not going to the Jesus arc. Why? I don't know why you become obsessed with the Jesus arc today, you weirdo.
All I'm saying is the Passion of the Christ could be a Hellraiser movie.
It could, maybe it's a prequel, But I always thought of it as like a bit tongue in cheek, because it's like this is the consequences of all of the shit that he's done in his life, of being horrible and trying to chase like the ultimate pleasure and that experience, and now he's finally got it, and he's going to be tortured for eternity. So he's kind of like, well, Jesus wept. It's, it's like, oh well, tongue in cheek. It's kind of on me. That's the way I always kind of interpreted it. What about you, Eve?
I don't know. I mean, like you've pretty nailed it on the head in my head now. I was like listening to you going, yeah, you're spot on. I don't know. The whole, I mean, I was more thinking just the ending in general. I was more thinking from a different perspective in my mind of just when I was viewing it the first time and things like that, of like, this was the scene that cemented it in my mind, thinking like I'd been like questioning the whole film, but this was the scene that cemented it. Just like, is this kind of like heaven and hell kind of parable kind of in my mind with the way Frank is at the end, but the way that he's just so, but for me, then the horror part of me just came out and went, instead of reading into it, I was just like, fucking hell, that's amazing when it gets pulled apart.
Yeah.
It's just an absolutely brutal, and from the scene, seeing it, it's just an absolutely brutal scene, but it's also like, Frank's such a like hate but you love him kind of character.
Yeah.
So it's so it's so interesting the way that you're feeling. Like in one way you enjoy him, in another way you can't wait for this fucked up guy to get pulled apart
Yeah.
in such a violent way from heaven and hell.
And then it's just so amazingly done. And then we kind of expect that that's going to be the end of the film because they've made this deal with Kirsty that you give us Frank and we won't take you for opening the box. And then the Cenobites are just like, well, why'd you believe us? We're Cenobites. And they just betray her.
Sure that, because I obviously hadn't seen this the first time I watched it, and I said that to Simon beforehand. I was like, there's a whole bit where like the Cenobites turn on Kirsty. But when you watch the scene back, they don't actually agree to the deal.
No, they don't. They say maybe, don't they?
Maybe. So they never actually renege on the deal because they never make one. And that's an error on Kirsty's part. You need to get it in writing.
Yeah.
Sign it. Making deals with demons, for love.
Yeah. If anything, these demons, they're not from our dimension, so they're not really bound to our kind of codes of conduct, are they?
No, it needs to be signed in Frank's blood.
Yeah, signed in Frank's blood. You can't, you wouldn't give a loan to a Cenobite, they're not going to pay you back. They have no concept. So you can't make a deal with them. They're just going to be like, well, nah. Like, we made a deal. Nah, change my mind.
They're beyond this world, which I like. I like the idea of that, though. The fact that there are no bounds on this. The fact that it's not just a clean and cut kind of way to end the film. It is definitely another thing that kind of raises the idea that it's not so, clean cut. You think you could just make a straight up deal with a creature of a hellbound world.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah. And then everybody kind of gets the one thing I never got is Stephen just turns up at the house and does nothing.
Yeah. He is the most useless character in this film.
Yeah.
And like we were discussing this earlier because we were like, what is his purpose in this movie other than to just kind of give Kirsty a boyfriend or to kind of give her something to do out when she's not on screen or when she's not part of the main narrative? And I can't understand what he shows up at the most random places.
Yeah.
He's at their house and then he turns up at the hospital and it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you there, Stephen?
Yeah.
It's going to be a really niche reference, and I feel like it's going to go over all three of your heads, but somebody out there will appreciate this. In Gilmore Girls: A Year in the Life, Rory,
I know this.
one of the characters' boyfriend, that throughout the entire season, she keeps going, I completely forgot I had a boyfriend. Oh, I forgot to wake up with him. Oh my God, I forgot I invited him. And that's who Stephen is to me. He is I don't even remember what the boyfriend's name is in the Gilmore Girls show, but he is that character, just like moved into the Hellraiser.
Yeah.
I forget he exists. I watched the film. I must have finished watching the film 4 hours ago, maybe. And I forgot until you mentioned him that he exists.
I forgot he'd arrived back in. He is he's the character from when you see early on. He's the character that you're just waiting, right? At what point is he somehow going to be drawn into death?
Yeah.
Basically. He seems like the character that in any other horror franchise, he would be the guy that was offed about midway through to add an extra death into the film.
Yeah.
And yet it never happened. It's almost like while Clive Barker was doing the screenplay, he suddenly went, oh shit, he was in this film. And suddenly went, oh, I better do something. Or Kirsty needs someone to arrive to help.
Yeah. Or he went, shit, Kirsty hasn't had sex. I need more sex.
Yeah. And then it got all of the extra sex got cut.
Because there's a scene where there's a brief kind of sex scene between them, and I was like, what? I was like, am I watching some strange version of this, like extended cut? I've never seen this scene in like the 7 or 8 times I've watched this. And then I was like, oh yeah, he just turns up.
I don't know.
Wait, is there a sex scene between Kirsty and Stephen?
Yeah. It's an implied scene or something like that,
Oh, it implied the implication.
Yeah, the implication. But it's literally, I think the scenes that Stephen gets is he pipes her when she moves into a new place. He's at the dinner table doing the cigarette trick. He's at the hospital, but I'm taking your word for that, Simon, because I don't remember him being in that scene. And
I
then
remember him
at
showing
the
at
end,
the hospital. That's the only one I actually remember.
and at the end, he rocks up, just like imagine like
Let's
I
get
don't
out
know,
of this
yeah.
collapsing house.
Imagine, I don't know how long they've been together, but imagine like you've got like a new partner and you're just like, I'm going to go see what they're doing tonight. You walk into their house and they're fighting demons from another dimension. You just be like, oh, okay.
I think you'd be off.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And then when she throws the box into a fire, you then see a homeless man emblaze himself in fire and then turn into a giant winged like dragon and then fly away. I'd be like, I don't think I want to be in this relationship anymore. You know, back on Tinder.
Or
I do
for some
love
people, they really want to be in that relationship now.
Yeah.
I was waiting for it.
I do love though that this film ends really open-ended. Because obviously we get the weird skeletal dragon creature flying away, and then like there's just Kirsty and that like stood there. But the next scene is it's the Chinese guy again sat at the table asking the same question that opens the film.
Yeah, I love it.
Because the same line, and I like that it kind of is just a circular. The idea that this has happened over and over and over and over again.
I love it.
And it always begins and ends the same way. I think it's really cool.
And I
It's
think
kind of that idea of like hell is never ending, isn't it? Like, there's always going to be food for the machine in that sort of sense. There's always going to be people that are looking to explore these sort of situations.
Yeah,
things they should have been.
People never learn. Yeah, people never learn from their mistakes.
And I think knowing that it's not just like a random homeless man who turns into a dragon, you know, knowing that it is the same person and it's like a guardian of this box, and then that's how it ends up being given to a new owner, for me kind of tightens the film up a little bit. And it's kind of, because before it was like, what? Like it just goes, but knowing that it's the same character and that it's a guardian of the box kind of links it all up really well, I think.
No, it's a great ending. All I can think was when you said about the monster again, and the fact that earlier on you said you called it the bone monster. And from everything we've talked about in this episode, all I can imagine is just like a monster with a giant dong now.
A skeleton. And funnily enough,
he's the bone monster. Or my brain's just gone to weird places now. I'm just literally, how was there not a Cenobite sex orgy scene? And how was there not, all these things I feel like now should have, I feel like Clive Barker wanted, but didn't get.
I feel like the engineer should have had some little bollocks or something. Just a tiny little sack somewhere on it.
Yeah, like we see naked skinless Frank at one point. We don't see like a skinless Dick though.
Yeah.
How do they not get skinless? Hanging skinless dog.
Hanging skinless dog. Yeah.
There you go. Am I the only person now that can't watch this movie with a straight face watching Skinless Frank after seeing that meme of the jogger running from like the muffin guy, and it's like me, Frank from Hellraiser, after my skin.
Yeah.
So, like every time I see this movie, I just think of that sequence.
I love it.
But like,
so good.
I love this movie for a multitude of different reasons, but I do think that they do like. I do wonder what would have happened if this movie had been in the hands of any other director.
Yeah,
I'm with you. Said, somebody that maybe understood. Like, I keep imagining what David Cronenberg's Hellraiser looks like.
Yeah.
You know, someone who has the understanding not only of the monsters, but the human creatures, but the effects work.
Yeah.
Because this came out around a similar time as The Fly. And if you imagine, like, Hellraiser directed by Cronenberg with a Fly budget, and, like,
insane.
You know, you just imagine how good it could be. But I think in a weird way, Clive Barker is a director and creator who's obsessed with the idea of his monsters and what the monsters represent to him in his own life, rather than the human characters. And I think that's represented not only in this movie with how Kirsty kind of almost plays third and fourth fiddle to like an adulteress, her shit dad, and a skinless nympho, and like some Cenobites.
Yeah.
And then like you look at like how Helen is represented in like Candyman. She's kind of second fiddle to, you know, she's involved in her own love triangle with her own shitbag husband and like this well-spoken monster who kind of wants to take her away from this life. And I kind of do wonder if that's part of the failings of this movie is we are never really sure who we're supposed to be rooting for. Like, do we want are we rooting for the Cenobites? Are we rooting for Julia? Are we rooting for Frank? Are we rooting for Kirsty? You know, do we want Steve to fuck Kirsty in a train station? Like, and I think that's kind of the only failing I think this movie has is there's no defining lines between who we're supposed to be rooting for, because there are a lot of characters in this film that feel half-baked in a sense. It's like three movies trying to be pulled together, but you know, I think it all comes together in the end. But there are large sections of this movie, like you guys said, where you're just like, what the fuck is happening? Like all the stuff with Julia and Frank is kind of like Hollyoaks on steroids.
Yeah.
And then you've got Kirsty, who's walking around just like apparently doing whatever the fuck she's doing. And then, you know, Pinhead's just sat there like, come on, man, somebody's
Open
given
the
the
box.
top.
Yeah.
One of the scenes with Kirsty is her like walking around.
Yeah,
Like-
industrial estates and
Like she's going somewhere, but I don't know where it is. And in my head, I just think Kirsty's just super into jogging.
yeah. Yeah.
That's what she's up to the rest of the film. Is she's just going and finding out jogging spots.
Yeah.
No, you can't say it's a perfect film in that way, because it's just, you can tell that Clive Barker was just making stuff up as he was going along.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the actors probably didn't even know exactly what they were doing half of the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty sure the actress who played Julia has said that it was a bit of a just like she had no clue what was going on, and half the time it was just like, go bang this dude and go bang this dude. And I believe, because she's even said she's never even watched, like she's only watched like 10 minutes of the film.
That's kind of why I love it though, because it's so unconventional, and there's something about it which feels very like unique, and like only Clive Barker could have probably pulled it off. You know, there's something about it being in Britain, and I don't know, there's a certain feeling it gets and certain nuances. I had this when Black Mirror stopped being made by British people and was then taken up by Netflix and done by Americans, and it lost part of what made it interesting, and it lost a lot of it, I think. And I think that's maybe where, because both of the first two films are set in England, and then the future, 3 onwards are predominantly, apart from being set in space and back in like,
I had no clue about the space one.
Back in Italy or something. Most of them are all set in America, and I think there's something maybe about it not having Clive Barker's influence over it that kind of, I don't know, maybe that's where they struggle. And it will be interesting to see how the new one on Friday, how it manages it. Because like you said, it's an adaptation of the novel. It's kind of not tied into the franchise that's already there. So it'll be really interesting to see how they do it, particularly because obviously Clive Barker wrote the story. Yeah. So he will have a lot of ideas behind it, and he'll know what those ideas were like or how to flesh them out. So it'll be interesting to see somebody else's adaptation of that and the interpretation of Hellraiser and the Cenobites and all of that,
Yeah, because is Clive Barker involved with this one at all?
I don't know.
Because there was a Hellraiser TV show that was also meant to be at the same time, and I can't remember which one he was involved with the TV show or this movie.
Yeah.
So from what I know, he is a producer in name only on the film.
Yeah.
But David Bruckner and Jamie Clayton both said in an interview recently that he was very forthcoming with information. So they went to him and were like, this is what we're planning to do. Like, these are our ideas. Like, have you got any input? And apparently he was very giving with his time, and he kind of gave a lot of input and gave a lot of ideas. The TV series, now, I think this is what's going to divide people. The TV series is being done by HBO, but it's being done by David Gordon Green, who's done the most recent Halloween trilogy.
Yeah, that's the one I remember now. Yeah.
I think this is going to be what divides people, because David Bruckner, a lot of people have, he built up a lot of goodwill with The Night House being an insane movie. Yeah. But a lot of people don't like this new Halloween trilogy, and the fact that he's doing an Exorcist trilogy as well. So I think it all depends. I think they're going down the more of the Pinhead is going to be a man. We're going to kind of follow what the movie sort of did, the original trilogy. Whereas this was more of a, let's kind of take the original novel as a jumping off point and then expand out to kind of explore different pockets of what this, because at this point, this is a franchise that's been set in the 18th century and space and the future all in the same movie. One of these movies has got a Hellraiser convention where the Hellraiser movies have become their own online game like Warcraft, and a bunch of people go to a Hellraiser convention. That's the movie that's got Henry Cavill in it in his first film role, who gets a blowjob and then subsequently that gets killed by a Cenobite straight after.
Nice.
Was directed by Scott Derrickson, who did Sinister and The Black Phone. So there's a lot of like weird, but a lot of, like, every sequel from 4 to 10 was a script that wasn't written as a Hellraiser movie. It was something that the Weinsteins acquired and then wrote the Cenobites into it. But it is interesting because I've obviously we'll talk more about this in the next episode. But David Bruckner said that he turned around and watched all of the other 10 films, read a lot of the novels, and wanted Clive Barker's approval and wanted to have the man on hand to kind of know where his film was going. Whereas I think David Gordon Green is just like he did with Halloween. He's like, nah, just gonna do my own thing. Just gonna do this thing over here, guys. Like, So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the two properties turn out.
Well, I mean, has anybody got any more comments on the original?
It was anything else to say?
No, I'm good.
No? Oh, right. Well, I mean,
no, actually.
Before we end,
Although I will say, I will ask you one question because I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to kind of get your perspective on this.
I hate when you say that.
Obviously, as men, the three of us, we probably get something different out of Hellraiser than what you do. So, as a woman, what is it that kind of made you pick Hellraiser over? Is there something in the story? Is there something in the character of Pinhead? Like, what is it that drew you into the story of Hellraiser, and what makes this a movie that you were more interested in?
Okay, I think I get what you're asking me. Okay, a huge part of it is Clive Barker.
Yeah.
Because before we even watched Pinhead, we'd watched Candyman. I'd fallen in love with Candyman, and then Pinhead as a character is written very similarly to how Candyman is. They're both very well spoken. They're both like these imposing figures that kind of mark me down as scared and horny. Like they are the epitome. Both of those characters are the epitome of mark me down as scared and horny. And I think that's part of the reason why I love it so much. I love that there's this character that's kind of weirdly sexual, yet intrinsically terrifying. Also, it really helps that they got Tony Todd and Doug Bradley to play them, who both have very attractive voices.
Yeah, I get that.
Basically, that was my roundabout way of saying, am I going to have to buy a Pinhead cosplay?
Pretty much, yeah.
That, to be fair, earlier that was my first thought when she said she liked Pinhead. I was like, so you got them at home? You got some pins?
Yeah.
You've been sticking them on.
Because I feel like Jamie Clayton is very much going to cement me as horny and scared.
I hope so.
Then we'll discuss getting some roleplay costumes, though.
Right. Well,
I'll be Pinhead. You can be Skinless Frank.
Yeah, you be Skinless Frank. Cover yourself in tomato ketchup.
That sounds amazing. Right. Well, thank you, guys. It's been amazing to have you on again. We love your back and forth, and we enjoy getting to do episodes together. It's nice to have the first time to get all four of us to do an episode together. It's been It's been interesting.
It's been fun.
It's been a crazy ride. Many odd tangents. I'm sure we didn't. I mean, for some people listening, they might be going, I wanted to listen to an episode about Hellraiser, not about hanging dongs.
Yeah. I mean, where can people find your podcast? Just to
link it back
in.
I mean, if they're interested in Hellraiser and not tangents, probably best you don't, because that's what the majority of our podcast is. But if you do want to find us, we are SAMAHF pod, no?
SIMAHF pod on Twitter.
Nice. So I married a horror fan on Tumblr and Instagram.
All one word, all lowercase.
I did see you punishing me because I did it last week without your feeling on me. Jumped in and stole the thunder. But yeah, there you go. That's our social media. How many others?
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you're... Oh, sorry. Go, Simon.
As always, we want to thank you guys for being absolutely gracious hosts. And I feel like you've learned way more about me, specifically as a person, than you probably ever needed to. But yeah, you know, we love like coming on and talking to you guys. Like, you know, in outside of podcast land, we like chat quite frequently. And I feel like our podcasts are very similarly lined up and we have very similar opinions on things. So it's always fun to come on and chat with you guys. And, you know, we just appreciate the fact that you guys have continued to support us and continue to ask us to come back. I feel like maybe you bit off a little bit more than you could do.
Never.
No, this is honestly exactly what we wanted out of this episode. If it's a straightforward episode, like, to be honest, when we're doing the podcast, the worst episodes are the ones when we feel like we've spent the whole time talking about the film, to be honest. Like, I feel like that's not what the fun of coming up with. It's your own experiences, your own memories.
Yeah.
I mean, because of comments on Halloween, I don't know if we will have you back.
No.
But that's for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm joking. We absolutely love having you guys on.
Yeah.
It's so nice. And it's nice to have this kind of nice community around us that we're trying to build more guest slots in and get more people for ours, but it's nice. Like, I know you guys have the same, like a bunch of guests coming on, and so it's nice. We've got that links coming through the whole community, and so anyone listening, this Friday, sorry, when you're listening to this, it's this Friday. Hellraiser is out. Whether it's out on the UK, where it's out in the UK, we don't currently know. Whether it's on Disney Plus, it seems like the most likely place for it to pop up. Maybe it will. Maybe everyone will be pirating it this weekend, this coming time. But you need to go and check us out on So I Married a Horror Fan. That went so wrong.
I think
Sorry, Married a Pan podcast. I married a horror pan. All right, felt like it was going smoothly. So I'm not. You chose say it now. I'm not tongue-tied.
We so the new Hellraiser will be out on the 7th of October. You can come and check us out on So I Married a Horror Fan podcast.
That's the one.
Where we'll be going in depth with it. As always, thank you for listening to the show. Make sure you go and check out So I Married a Horror Fan podcast. And please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. It helps us grow. And we will see you soon. Goodbye.